Yep.
We can see you, Karen.
Good, great. Okay. So welcome to the Data for Good keynote panel at DataCon 2020. And it's great to see you early on a Saturday morning. I first want to give a shout out to Subash D'Souza, who is the organizer, as you all know, of DataCon LA and the initial force behind the Data for Good initiative. He had a vision, and it was just about a year ago that a few of us started coming together to figure out what we could do with this in this space. And it was really kind of vague. It was use data to solve some community problems. And a year later, we have 4 projects under our belt. We have a nascent organization. We have a board of 20 active advisors, plus innumerable volunteers across tech, academia, nonprofits, the civic space. And they range from founders to CIOs to college students. So this is pretty remarkable in the space of a year, and this is the experience we want to be sharing with you this morning. I think there's also a Data for Good track at this conference, which I think is a significant achievement. We have a dozen nonprofits presenting. We have healthcare, universities, and civic representatives with impressive work on issues across asthma, healthcare deserts, domestic violence, food insecurity. So I strongly encourage you to check out the Data for Good sessions. I think you'll be really impressed by the kind of work that nonprofits and others are doing in the social space. Just one little personal note, this is really huge for me. One of my initial motivators in founding LA Tech for Good was to narrow the gap between tech and nonprofits and the social sector. And so I'm really excited to see all these people in the same room. Our mission for LA Tech for Good is to support and inspire, showcase tech initiatives that support and inspire social change. So the Data for Good track is dear to our hearts, and I hope you will take a minute to check us out when you can. And just for context, these are very turbulent, even historic times. I think that, to put it like in maybe, I don't know what kind of terms, good and evil are contending strongly in the world right now. And if you're a technologist who's making a difference, we applaud you. If you're looking to make a difference, we hope this gives you inspiration and options. And my bottom line here is, let's together make the world a better place. So with that perspective, just one quick note. We are going to have the Q&A window open, but in general, this will be a panel conversation. We may be able to weave some of the comments into the conversation, but if not, we will reach out to you after the event if there's something that needs to be addressed. So with that in mind, I want to first introduce the speakers. We have Savina Hawkins. She is an entrepreneur in residence at Eventbrite, and she is going to tell you about the proof project that she worked on with around police brutality and data. Todd Charazas, he's executive director at AILA and Data for Good, and he will let you know about the great work they did in a clean air initiative that's part of the IDEA Accelerator. Xavier Kochar, founder at the Video Genome Project, will be talking about the data portal that they've developed. And Jeanne Holm, chief data officer at the city of LA, will be telling you about our data literacy project. So with that being said, we're going to go through the panelists one by one and a few minutes to tell us about yourself and about your pod. And why don't we start with you, Savina?
Sorry, just unmuting. So I'm a Stanford and Harvard trained democratic innovation specialist. That's kind of the focus of my studies so far. When I joined Data for Good, it was right in the middle of when Black Lives Matter was becoming a global movement and getting a lot of traction and a lot of attention. So we all knew as a group that we needed to do something in this space and we didn't really know what to do. So there's so much to say about this project, and I hope my audience forgives me for reading, but I'm actually going to read the one pager that we've put together to sort of summarize this track of work. So when the Black Lives Matter movement gained such momentum that it finally and thankfully became a global movement, Data for Good felt it needed to step up. So we launched a design research project to understand what role data currently plays in police brutality and systemic injustice. The goal would be to learn and not to act. Over the course of a few months, we interviewed activists, community members, policymakers, public defenders, police, leaders in government, community health experts, and for-profit companies that work with government data, researchers of police brutality that work with data, and even actual victims. They taught us that data played a role that was both helpful and hurtful. Data was helpful when activists and researchers used it to make cogent points that could inform real interventions. Campaign Zero's 8 Can't Wait is an excellent example of how police data can be used to inform effective policymaking. Another example is that a police brutality data researcher was able to use data on shift lengths and shift assignments to expose how deployment and staffing patterns are meaningfully correlated with violence. But more generally, we saw ways in which data was not being used for good. We learned that Palantir, a tech company, is collecting massive amounts of data on civilians through surveillance. We learned, unsurprisingly, that when predictive policing algorithms are built on data sets that carry the same biases of our culture, they reify the deeply embedded cultural mechanisms of systemic inequality. When we build predictive analytics without recognizing and removing these horrific cultural mechanisms, our machines perpetuate systemic racism by offering racist predictions. Lastly, we learned that the amount and quality of data that is available to revolutionary activists compared to the data available to those who had a stake in keeping the system as it is was deeply alarming. The sophistication of democratic data tools was embarrassingly low. While a whole industry existed to put sophisticated data technologies in the hands of the oppressors. Worse still, we learned how corruption can disrupt even our most altruistic goals of transparency and data collection and circumvent laws that were put in place to ensure data transparency around these police brutality incidents. So we finished this project with a sense of both of heaviness and of hope. The problem is severe, it is systemic, it is difficult to solve, it is real. None of this is new. That is the heavy truth of our reality today. Where the money, resources, and usable data flowed in the ecosystem, made fully visible the power imbalance that keeps the systemic issue from being solved. But we also ended this project with hope. Data will have a massive impact on systemic injustice and police brutality. It is up to us, those of us who work with data, to care about how data is used and the impact that it has, and to lend our talents to seeing that it be used to end systemic injustice, rather than automate its dark impulse by embedding it into our country's digital data infrastructures. So that's an introduction to our project. I'm excited to get more into the details further on in this panel. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Sabina. Xavier, how about you? Tell us about the data portal. Are you there?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, apologies. Good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, okay. You're good.
Good morning. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. My name is Xavier Kochar. As Karen mentioned, I am the founder of the Video Genome Project, which is a structured data company that operated in the semantic data set space, and we utilize those data sets for video content, in particular over-the-top video content. Currently, I am in a strategy and M&A role at AT&T Inc., working both with the communications company, that's the mobility, retail stores, and DirecTV, as well as Warner Media, which is Warner Brothers HBO, and the old Warner Brothers HBO and Turner. The project that I'm going to speak about today for Data for Good is the data portal. And we'll get into a little bit of why I was very interested in this project, but at a very high level, what we've done, what the advisory board and the board of Data for Good, as well as a handful of volunteers have done, is we have created a portal, an online portal where the community, all of you, can upload any projects that you may be working on, not-for-profit projects, things like, quite frankly, what Sabina just talked about, and upload what your needs are, what data sets you have been working with, and the idea is to create sort of a clearinghouse or a marketplace of data and data groups, data sets, so that there's a lot of base level data that people don't need to reinvent the wheel on, that others have already done, particularly in academia, in the private sector as well, public sector. And so our idea, the idea behind the portal is to make it data that everyone else has been using accessible to, quite frankly, anyone who needs it. So we'll talk a little more about it, and we'll get into it a little more in detail a little later on in this panel. But the success of the data portal relies on all of you all contributing and both uploading data and uploading your projects, as well as pulling down from it. So we'll talk a little more about it in a little bit, and thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, Xavier. Jeanne, how about you? Would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeanne Holm. I'm the Chief Data Officer and the Mayor's Senior Tech Advisor at the City of Los Angeles. And I've been working in data for 37 years. So before I came to the city, I was doing this at NASA, at the World Bank in Africa and Russia, and with the White House for 6 years with the Obama administration, opening up data through data.gov. And so the work that we're doing here on the data literacy area under Data for Good is really important, and we try to be as expansive as possible. I would just like to say a quick shout out to my core team members, Katie Gagnes, Marie Smith, Maria Khan, Karen, of course, and Subhash, Jermaine, who you heard from earlier, Ronnie, Winston Wang, and Fawn and Anita Sengupta, because I really think that the work that we're doing together is really a team effort. So data literacy was, when we put together Data for Good, we looked at all of the different aspects of what was going on around the Los Angeles and Southern California areas. And we realized that there are tons of technical skills training. So there's lots of things going on Python or R or data analytics or predictive analytics. But when we looked at the core of what we wanted to do as an organization, we realized that we wanted to empower people with the ability to use data to advocate for the things that were important to them. And with the massive diversity of voices in Southern California, that meant really reaching to our nonprofits and startup groups and entrepreneurs and even individuals who are trying to understand from a non-technical perspective how they could use data, where they could find data, and how they could make sure that they were using this in a way which helped to advocate for their causes, whatever those causes might be. So our focus has been on trying to look at the things that are of highest interest to the Southern California community. We think locally, but attract globally. So our speakers come from many different places. Our participants come from many different places. And the topics, while we tune them in for Southern California, we really do think about the impact these topics have. We decided that the best way to get started was a series of webinars. I know, there's tons of Zoom webinars out there, but we felt like that was an important way to get started and start to understand where people's interests are, start to build the community around it, and be able to build off of the success of other organizations like DataCon LA. So we put together a pretty robust infrastructure for organizing, identifying ideas, recruiting and organizing speakers, and making sure that the discussions as they launch are really on point and on track. And then a variety of advertising across the most successful social media platforms for this group, which, yes, we include Twitter, but really LinkedIn happens to be one of our most robust platforms because it's really kind of focused around things that are more in people's line of work. So we do use a variety of mechanisms and Eventbrite and others to attract people. So what we've done so far is that we really wanted to focus first on the topic that is just the elephant in the room, which is healthy communities. And rather than just being about COVID-19, the idea was, how do we bring together people to discuss the impact that data has on them? We're all awash in data, right? Everybody has heard huge numbers, and I think we've all become experts on case fatality rate and case transmissions. But at the same time, it becomes overwhelming. And if you're trying to create actionable work on it, it can become difficult. So we focused our conversations in the first case around healthy communities and data science. That was back in September. We brought in somebody from the National Health Foundation and told stories about how they're using data to make an impact in people's lives and provide better services. And we brought in Eleazar Eskin from UCLA Computational Medicine to talk about how they're specifically working around data for COVID. So as we put together these stories and these events, we're attracting an audience of people we hope we can inspire, that we hope we can kind of see possibilities in the way others have used data for them to be able to use data. And our upcoming events are around social justice, media and data science, which should be quite interesting, environmental justice, social entrepreneurship, education, and the ethics of data science. So again, we're not going to be teaching you how to do R or Python, but we are going to be giving you access to the resources, the data, the inspiration, the stories, and the ability to move forward with what you want to do to advocate for data in the way that you see you want to change the world.
And myself working on that same team with Jeanne, I think she did a great job of explaining what we're doing. So thank you, Jeanne. And Todd, how about you? Tell us, introduce yourself and your project, please.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Todd Charazas. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit AIOA. We are more event-based, so we pre-COVID would host a number of different events per month, focusing on everything from sustainability to entertainment media to health and wellness, and having conversations around how technology should be used ethically and fairly. I am also now the executive director of Data for Good, which I'm very proud of, and it's amazing to be with such an amazing group of volunteers working on all these different types of interesting projects. I also am, because I have so many different hats, the director of marketing for a local startup called Bobble Sports, developing interactive fan engagement for live entertainment. And probably have a new job by tomorrow too that I'll talk to you about. But for right now though, it's all about Data for Good and of course being at DataCon. And we have this, one of the programs out of the 3 programs that we have in our organization is called the Idea Accelerator. And everything that we're talking about today is really being, spawned from that Idea Accelerator. And the one specific project that I got to really work on and helped get it to the finish line at least is one around clean air. And so when we talk about healthy communities and we talk about, how we're, everyone here breathes, right? And so with Clean Air Coalition, we partnered with another nonprofit here in Los Angeles called Coalition for Clean Air. They're an advocacy group. They work with a number of different types of stakeholders to, improve public health, improve air quality, and of course, prevent climate change. And one of the biggest challenges that they were facing is that their environmental scientists couldn't really aggregate all the data that they needed from purple air sensors that they use throughout Los Angeles County in a meaningful way. And so they were using, spending countless hours of time just doing basic work when they could have, have a web tool that could actually alleviate those pains. And so what we did is, which we'll talk about more later today, is we helped work with them, interview them, find out their real, pain points, and then through a 10-day design sprint, we were able to develop a working prototype for them to click around with, and it was supported by experts in the field and by certain stakeholders at the Coalition for Clean Air. And at the end of the day, yeah, we have a working prototype, which we're now ready to go into phase 2, which is actually building the actual web app and publishing it as an open source project so that it can continue to live on past our initial conception. And so I'm looking forward to talking more about that whole project in detail, and of course, learning more about the other projects at Data for Good.
Thanks, Todd. Now, the first question I'm going to ask to the whole group, and if you want to take a minute or two to respond, I know everybody's spoken to it a bit, but elaborate a little bit more on why this particular project. If you didn't speak to the key need or issue you're addressing, one thing might be how did you scope out your project? So just give us a little bit more in terms of why this particular project. And Todd, since you're last up, I'll let you go first here.
Sure. Well, this project's close to my lungs and my mental health because actually a recent study just came out, I think last week, that there's actually a direct correlation between pollution, air pollution, and neurological diseases. And so with that said, right, I know definitely I live in downtown Los Angeles. Whenever I move up to Pasadena or go anywhere where there's more trees and greenery, I can definitely tell a huge difference in the quality, in like how I'm breathing and even how I'm feeling. And so when the Coalition for Clean Air came to Data for Good, and it was just teasing the idea that they would love to work with us on some type of project, it was just something that we definitely wanted to get involved with. And so for me, again, it's just we're all breathe air, and helping an organization like them really streamline their processes is something that I wanted to see through. And so that's primarily why yeah, I'm excited for this project, and why I'm still going to make sure that we go into phase 2 and see it all the way through.
Awesome, that's exciting. Let's go backwards. Jeanne, Xavier, and then Savina on the same question. Why this project?
Sure. So I think that the most essential thing for people to be able to do in the whole open data movement is to be able to use the data for things that they think are important. So in looking at all of the things that we could do with Data for Good, empowering people to do the work themselves, to be able to advocate for themselves, and to be able to move forward with their ideas seemed like the very most important thing to do. And, we really looked at the different capabilities that were already out there, and we realized that while there were some groups that were working on helping specific demographics or specific industries use data, I think Savina mentioned a few that maybe are good and bad, but that there isn't really one that's focused kind of more broadly across the nonprofit sector, and really looking at how can we help the nonprofits who are using data, but maybe could use data in a different way or have some additional resources to be able to do that. And so, as an educator, I've been a professor at UCLA for 23 years now. And as a professor, both on campus and then I teach my courses in South LA and Pico Union, I really see the difference that it makes to people when they are able to talk to others with facts and figures behind the work that they do, and to be able to look at maps and understand those maps and the demographic data and how it makes a difference in what they're advocating for and who it affects. And being able to help lift up the nonprofit community in and around Southern California in looking at the use of that data and how to do it is really, I think, one of the key things that we can do to empower people.
I love that. Xavier?
So why is this project and this pod so near and dear to my heart? Well, the first thing I neglected to mention in the intro is anybody that is live streaming this, or if you're watching this later on YouTube or on the DataCon website, I encourage you all to go to the data portal even right now. And that website is dclad4g.com. Again, that's D as in dog, C-L-A, D as in dog, the number 4, G.com. And this will, once you're there, you'll get a little bit better idea of what it is. Now, as far as why of all the things and all the great, all my fellow panelists and all the leaders at Data for Good that have quite frankly volunteered their own very valuable time to work on these projects, and they're all super important. And I'm passionate about all of them, but this one in particular, it felt right to me, because I have spent a big part of my life sort of living the mantra that we should make data accessible for all. And that's one thing that attracted me to DataCon initially, and Data for Good. And one of the things that I've seen the greatest innovation has come from learnings from other spaces. So if you have been working on in a certain industry, it's kind of can you and then you transfer to another industry, can you take the insights from that first industry and innovate in the second? And the best way to do that is really ideally, if you can actually go from industry to industry or sector to sector, but that's a little harder to do. But maybe what's a little easier to do is, can you learn from others that have already been doing this? And that's really the idea behind the data portal, is really to not just share data, but also share the experiences. Any, what was it like to build, to move forward in a certain project? So even after the insights that Jeanne and Todd and Savina can provide one another, and that can provide us, are so valuable. Now I have access to everybody on this panel, but maybe everyone who's watching may not have access. But the idea is now you do. So if you go to this portal and you upload whatever you're working on or any questions you may have or any requests, then we kind of like a hive mind, we can all come together and help one another. And that's something, honestly, if we do that, I mean, I had this, I've been using this term for a long time, the power of collective human intelligence, right? So let's tap into all of our intelligence and all of our experiences. And that's what we're attempting to do with this data portal.
Oh, I'm so impressed with everybody's work. Who's remaining? Savina.
Yes, me. So the sort of rationale behind our project and why we scoped it as a research project and not as a sort of more action-driven design sprint style project is just precisely because we were trying to scope the project appropriately and match it to the complexity of the problem that we were, looking into and trying to understand. So of course, police brutality is one of many horrific outputs of systemic injustice, which is embedded into the structures of our society and really how many different institutions cooperate and all of that. So, we recognize that there's no way to solve something this complicated and this entrenched in, the short span of a design sprint. It just simply isn't possible. To quote many of our participants, if there was an easy solution or an easy intervention or an obvious solution that could come up in something like a design sprint, it would have already been done. So the goal behind this was really to kind of understand the mechanisms, understand the different pieces of infrastructure, understand the role that data plays, and how it all sort of works together as an ecosystem, and use that informed perspective to really equip activists and folks who are in a position to be able to make data more available to activists to really just understand what the problem is and know how they can contribute and how they can help.
Fabulous. So if you could talk a little bit, all of you could talk a little bit more about what have you accomplished to date and what's ahead? So we have a little bit more idea of the process, and then I know some of the projects are going to go on, some of them are not. So maybe those of you who are continuing on, give us a little taste of what's to come. So let's do alphabetically: Jeanne, Savina, Todd, and Xavier.
Wow, Jay's never come at the beginning. That's pretty impressive. So there's two things we've accomplished so far. So one is we held our first event, which, in and of itself is great. And that was the one on healthy communities. But more importantly, we kind of put together the structure around all of this. So we actually also have 6 events in planning process. And that's been really helpful to kind of like think ahead and have them dovetail to each other, and also to organize those events around different topics that may be timely. So, we have the presidential election, and it's going to be really interesting after that to talk about the role of media and data science and how that impacts the world around us. The other thing that I think I'm maybe most proud of is really building a diverse team. So, and to put people in rotational positions. We're looking for volunteers. I'm just going to put that out there. So anybody who's interested in joining our team, there's all kinds of things we're doing, from surveys to doing the events to recruiting speakers. And so we have a rotational place where we have moderators from different backgrounds coming in. We have resource site that we're putting together, and Katie and Maria, who are both amazing young women, have been really leading a lot of the specific work on this project. And I just really, again, think that a diversity of people understanding how we want to advocate and help others advocate for data, how we want to help others use data. If we don't have that diversity of voices at the table in planning these kinds of projects, we aren't really representational of of what's going on in Los Angeles. And I'll just restate the upcoming events. So in November, we'll be holding social justice and data science. Our speakers will include people from the ACLU and others. We'll be working on media and data science. For December, environmental justice, then social entrepreneurship, education, and the ethics of data science. I'm looking at you, Todd. So as we think about those, if you have ideas about other topics or specific speakers, or if one of you want to be a speaker at one of those or get involved in our pod, let's get in touch.
Great. And by the way, the website is in the chat with the volunteer option there. So feel free to go directly there and sign up. Sabina, you're next. Whoever thought this S would be the second one in the alphabet?
Really surprising. Our project was able to get 12 60 to 90-minute interviews done, and we just kicked off in late August, early September. So it's we networked our way to all of them. So we were very lucky to be able to use the network of Data for Good, and people were really generous with participating and connecting us with people who might be able to sort of open up the kimono and give us a really good perspective and understanding of what was going on. I also personally completed a lit review of over 50 books and articles and all the different data sources that are currently available, just to kind of see what's out there and map the landscape. And so all of this together is a really good amount of knowledge that we'd love to sort of find a better way to sort of share it with folks who are interested. So if anyone is in the audience, if you have a strong opinion on how to make this kind of information useful to you, for sure, please reach out to us and let us know. We want to be able to equip you with the knowledge that we've, worked hard to kind of put together.
Very cool. Important. Todd?
Hey. So for us, it was interesting. So in the very beginning, we, had this stakeholder, the Coalition for Clean Air, that came to us with a problem, or a list of problems actually. And so our job was to, one, find a product manager, someone that can actually kind of champion the project. And so we actually leaned on one of our partners, the Product Managers Associations of LA, and was able to find Eddie Park, who just was amazing and just helped us really bring together the other volunteers in the organization. And so the entire team was, I think, around 12 volunteers that spent over 600 hours over a span of 10 days working on this project. And so what we did in the very beginning was we had Ronnie Kim and her team at Collective Future kind of help facilitate Eddie and the other volunteers through this whole process, this 10-day process. And so through that whole process, we had about over 6 hours worth of interviews with different stakeholders and other experts that daily use purple air sensors daily. So there's about like over 200 purple air sensors throughout Los Angeles County. And there's also these sensors are throughout the entire world. But specifically, we were working about focusing on LA County. And so when we were going through all the interviews, there was a number of different, problems that, arise. And at the very end, the one piece that really stuck out that actually was, we could accomplish within the, time frame was, how can we help streamline their whole workflow from taking data from the purple air sensors, aggregating it, cleaning it up using certain algorithms, and then being able to actually spit out, output something that is a nice report that they could use. And so at the very end of the day, 10 days design sprint, we were able to create a clickable Figma prototype, an expanded feature list, and business logic using Python and R. And so that's really where our team was able to stand out was, one, they had to learn a lot. They had to learn about how to do quality control on these sensors. They had to learn about the algorithms for cleaning the data itself. And it was really an amazing accomplishment that all these 12 strangers, seriously, met each other online through our website, right, through our network, just everywhere we could find them, right? And then after vetting through all those volunteers, and making sure they understood what they were going to be doing, they're going to be spending at least 5 hours a day for 10 days. And, they got really excited because, again, we were living in this crazy pandemic and, some people don't have their internships that they would have had during the summer, or they got furloughed or laid off. And so this was an amazing opportunity for project-based learning where These all the volunteers got to learn a lot about environmental science and the purple air sensors, but then be able to have something to show for at the end of the 10 days. And so right now we have this first phase 1 completed, and the next phase is actually hiring some web developers and building out the web app, and working with other cool partners like Snowflake to help with the data management.
Cool. Xavier, anything you want to say on this question?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Karen?
Go ahead. What have you accomplished? What's ahead?
Got it. So, so similar to the other panelists, our approach to gathering or actually asking people to help us, is entirely a team of volunteers. We very quickly had to find project leaders, project managers, and hats off go to our project managers, Tala and Morley. I also would like to point out that I am although I was one of the board members that was part of the pod, I was actually not the leader of the pod. A lot of the credit goes to Jagjit Dhaliwal, who actually works very closely in the city with Jeanne. This would not be possible without his vision and his leadership. So hats off to the team. Look, what we accomplished, it's as any of you who have either created a website or built an app can tell you, boy, it's a lot easier when you whiteboard it than when you actually do it. A lot of that is because you realize that there's many things that go into it. It's not just coding. It's not just design or UX. It's not just what data goes on there, but it's really understanding everything from the user flow, the uploading. But what we did is, we relied on the skill sets of the team that we had, and we built this portal, this website. We had candidly, we had much grander visions for it, but we had to pare them down for at least the 1.0 version of it, because we wanted to see what you all think about it. We wanted to see how you guys used it, and we wanted to kind of, we as data analysts and data scientists, we talk a lot about utilizing usage data and the insights that come from it to drive decisions, and in particular business, commercial decisions. And so we thought, okay, let's practice what we preach, and rather than building this great big thing that we think is what everybody wants, let's put something out there. The concept, of course, Karen and I were talking about it the other day about the MVP. Let's put a minimum viable product out there and see how it goes, and then let's iterate pretty fast. So look, you will, as you guys hopefully are at the website, or you have it up in one of your browsers now. There's a couple of things about it, and I'll say this at least twice more before the panel's over, but it's only as valuable as what we put on there, and it's only as valuable as what we kind of pull off of there. And so it will get that. We've created a marketplace, and like every marketplace, the marketplace becomes relevant if people go to that marketplace. So it's built, it's up. Could it be better as far as some of the UI? Of course, we're a bunch of data folks here. We're not UI, UX people. By the way, if there's anyone that's listening to this live or in recording, we are also continuing to take volunteers. Anybody that wants to help out and make this better, we would welcome it. And remember, the better this gets, the easier that knowledge gets transferred to all of you.
I'm loving this. There's so much in this conversation here. We are starting to run a little bit behind because there is a lot. And so I have my next question, and I'm only going to ask like whoever wants to speak to this first two people. Data for Good, D4G is a new nonprofit. So I would, the question is, how has this supported and empowered or hindered your project and your work? Anybody want to speak to that question of this particular business model as a nonprofit? Two people.
I would love to, if that's okay. So it was an unbelievably helpful network to be able to do a research project like this, because we were working amid people who just genuinely care about seeing data be made available to activists, and that sort of shared interest and that shared drive allowed us to open the doors to just so many people who have the same sort of inclination and wanted to really talk about the problem and understand it collectively better. So just shout out to Jeanne, Jajit, and the data portal pod as a whole for doing these really critically important projects that are just so so needed. So thank you.
Awesome.
I'll go ahead.
Okay. Good.
So yeah, I mean, as a nonprofit, because right now we have no funding, and because we are leveraging volunteers, it would be pretty horrible if we were a for-profit company leveraging, free labor to run these projects. And so, being a nonprofit and having that, good intention there attracts the right people, right? You put yourself out there, and you attract, you attract certain types of people. And so, whether the name itself, Data for Good, lends that to anyone that's reads it and hears about this conversation. And definitely being under the nonprofit umbrella definitely helps us do the outreach, as like what Sabina spoke about, like going to knock on doors and saying, hey, we'd love to spend 30 minutes of your time, interview you. Being that we're coming from a nonprofit perspective, helps put down their guards a little bit and want to actually work with us, because they understand that we're coming at this from a good place, right? We're volunteering. We're also volunteers, right? Looking for other volunteers to help us with this mission. And so I am very supportive that we are a nonprofit, and it definitely has helped us at least work with other nonprofits, other local governments, and of course other organizations. And so for sure, us being a nonprofit helps us do what we did, everything we just did with the Clean Air Project, and for sure with Sabina's project, really all the projects was really only possible with the limited resources we had because of the nonprofit business structure. And so, yeah.
Cool. This might be the last question, but I want to ask each of you personally, why did you join this initiative and what does it mean to you? And you can take that in any order you want.
I'll jump in on that one. So I'm a third generation Angelino. I've always lived in Los Angeles. Even when I worked abroad for the World Bank or in DC for the White House, I actually just commuted from LA. So I don't want to talk about green footprints, but it's because I love this city and because I love the people here and the diversity that we have. And I think that ability for folks in Los Angeles to kind of activate. I mean, we watched people protesting on the streets, which is amazing. And it's a great demonstration of their civil rights. And giving people the power to use data in ways that they manifestly want to change the world is the best thing we can do as data scientists and for me as a person who works for the government. I know government service isn't for everybody, and I don't think everybody should work for the government, but I love the fact that there's so many people in Los Angeles with so many different ideas, and being able to ground those ideas in data and science is incredibly empowering and just really helps to bring people actually more together than it does to divide us.
Awesome. That's great. Xavier, maybe?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this a little bit in my initial comments. This is, we are better together, and you know, I think all of the pod leaders and everybody on this panel can attest to the fact that it's because we weren't doing this ourselves. And I don't just mean from a labor standpoint. I mean also from a perspective standpoint, from you know, problem solving standpoint. And look, I mean, Todd was mentioning this earlier. This is it's in the grander scheme of things, we just had a handful of volunteers. Imagine if we could tap into the experiences and the minds of everybody in the city of LA, in greater LA. And, you know, look, if all goes well, you know, maybe this expands. So for me, I think that this is kind of the point. This is maybe even the point of life, you know, is how we can help one another, how we can learn from one another, how we can avoid others from maybe entering the same pitfalls that we entered, and quite frankly, move further together. It's like that African proverb, right? Like, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And so, you know, it's great that Data for Good has at least started putting together a clearinghouse, a home for these ideas to be shared. I will, Karen, just in like 30 seconds, you mentioned kind of some of the, you know, being a nonprofit. You know, how has that hindered or helped our cause? Certainly, I think that you can tell by some of my comments and the comments of my fellow panelists. None of us are getting paid. None of us are doing this, and especially what Jeanne just said, you know, about being a third generation Angelino. We're doing this because we love this, and because it's we want to help out, and selfishly we know that if we help everybody out, then our city gets better, you know, and our state gets better, and our country gets better. So on the nonprofit side, we did encounter that. I don't think there wasn't a lot of you know, there wasn't a lot of anger. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing it that way? Because everyone knows we're just trying to help out. But on the downside, you know, look, we didn't get to necessarily, you know, we have to use whatever resources we have and whatever capital we had to work with, and the capital was zero. But if we work very hard, maybe next year it'll be twice that amount. Being a nonprofit, that's a little math humor for those on the live stream. Thank you, Todd, for smiling. So yeah. So what we would love is if you believe in this, okay, then and you feel that you could make, not just contribute to the portal from a project standpoint, but actually make it look better, make it operate faster. Have any ideas for it? We welcome you to come and help us out. And again, that portal is D as in dog, CLA, D as in dog, the number 4G.com. That's DCLAD4G.com. And thanks again for everybody listening in, and thanks again for participating.
Great. I posted that in the chat again. Sabina, you want to talk about this real quick?
Sure. So I guess the best way to answer this question is actually using, there's this very great climate activist who has a sort of proverb that he's come up with, which is that inevitably in the future, someone a third your age is going to walk up your driveway and knock on your door. And they're going to have two questions for you. The first one is, did you know about what was going on? And the second question is going to be, so what did you do? So I think that proverb is really, really telling, and it actually kind of hits at the heart of these systemic issues like climate change and social justice. We're in this moment of really a global reckoning where we need more individuals to take responsibility and to do their part to see the change that we all want to see happen in the world. So it's really a great honor to be able to work with the people I got to work with, and to be able to sort of create the knowledge that we ended up, you know, coalescing together. So. And I hope that this inspires more people to get out there and do their part and do, you know, build the world that we all want to see.
Fabulous. So, Todd, hold up just one quick second. I just want to say that I think that all the speakers have, through the course of the conversation, have promoted ways that you all can get involved. And so please either volunteer, go to the data portal, check out, connect with us offline. And on that note, I'm going to turn the session over to Todd as our executive director. He can speak a little bit to this question about what it means to him personally, but also he's going to give some closing remarks to this event.
Thanks, Karen. I wish I had a proverb ready because I feel like everyone had one. And Jeanne, I forgot that you were a third generation too. I'm a third generation Angelino as well. So love this city. Obviously, everything we're doing is out of labor of love, right? We spend these hours, we meet regularly not because we're going to profit from this in some way, but because we really care. And we hope that we attract those same type of people to come join us. And so as everyone has talked about before, we're consistently looking for new volunteers, whether you're a designer, you're a data analyst, you're a data scientist, you're a software engineer, or you're someone that just wants to get involved. The whole concept around data for good is obviously to use data for good and support our communities. But in doing so with volunteers, it's not like we're just trying to get free labor. This is supposed to be beneficial to you as a volunteer as well. This is how we want to develop project-based learning. And so when you are still in school, or you are trying to take that internship, or you're in between jobs, or even you have a normal day job and you want to have that side project, Data for Good has projects that you could be working on. And you're going to be working with an amazing team. I mean, our advisory board ranges from the chief data officer of LA City, Jeanne Holm right here, to other amazing people that run other or bigger organizations throughout Los Angeles in the private sector and other nonprofit sector as well. And so you're going to meet an amazing group of people. You're going to be advised by people that have been there and done it with 20, 30 years worth of experience. And so I guess the biggest call to action is that, please get involved. Tell your friends, find us on LinkedIn, go to our website, d4g.community, sign up as a volunteer. I mean, whether you're free today, you're free next week, or you're free next year, being inside of our database so that we can show you what projects are coming up in the pipeline will get you more prepared for what's to come. And again, if maybe you don't have the time today, but maybe in a few months from now you will, and you'll be very fortunate, happy that you were staying around, trying to help us as any way you could with outreach. But finally, when that day comes, you'll be able actually to dig into one of these data science projects that we're working on. And so if you can contribute to the data portal, please do. The link I think is in the chat. Please go to our website, d4g.community. We were able to spin that up within a few weeks just because of because of some certain volunteers. And so again, if you want to make our website look better and more beautiful and more engaging, reach out. That could be a project that you could own along with obviously another team of volunteers, and you can take credit. It'll add to your portfolio. You'll feel good about yourself, and you'll be working with an amazing team of people. And so selfishly, I wanted to do a shout out to another panel that's coming up later. It's a case study on the Clean Air Coalition project that we worked on. I think it's at 10:45. Ronnie Kim is going to be talking about the entire process that she went through, the 10-day sprint. And so I really hope that you can go check out that panel at 10:45 with Ronnie Kim from Collect the Future. Also, just if you are a provider of any kind, obviously we don't have money. We would love to get some free resources. If you would like to write us a check, we are open to that as well. And so seriously, this is a beautiful day, a beautiful time that we get to live in right now. I mean, obviously it's crazy out there. I mean, the election's coming up next week. I mean, everything's going, the world's in shambles. And so now more than ever, like everyone else said, we need to be coming together and working together so that we can, be the change that we want to see in the world. And so thank you all for your time today. I think that's the end of this session. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the weekend, digging into the content that Sabash and his amazing team of volunteers has worked on for this DataCon LA 2020. And so thank you all. Hope to see you soon in the real world. But please stay happy, healthy, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Awesome. Love it.
Thank you everyone for joining our D4G keynote, and thank you so much to all of our panelists for your commitment to continue to use data for good and devoting your time to really make an impact in our data and tech community. And as they alluded to, there's so many different ways for you to get involved or learn more about data for good. And you can do so. I know the link was dropped a few times throughout their presentation, but again, it's at d4g.community. And that concludes our keynote panelists for Data for Good today, and we look forward to having you join our next one shortly. All right. And for our next keynote speaker, it's one that you do not want to miss. We're thrilled to be joined by Karthik Ramasamy. Karthik Ramasamy is a Senior Director of Engineering managing the Pulsar team at Splunk. Before Splunk, he was the co-founder and CEO of Streamlio that focused on building next-generation event processing infrastructure using Apache Pulsar and led the acquisition of Streamlio by Splunk. Before Streamlio, he was the engineering manager and technical lead for real-time infrastructure at Twitter, where he co-created Twitter Heron. Twitter Heron was open source and used by several companies, and he has 2 decades of experience working with companies such as Teradata, Greenplum, and Juniper in their rapid growth stages building parallel databases, big data infrastructure, and networking. He co-founded Locomatics, a company that specializes in real-time streaming processing on Hadoop, Cassandra, using SQL, which was acquired by Twitter. Karthik has a PhD in computer science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a focus on big data and databases, and during his college tenure, several of the research projects he participated in were later spun off as a company acquired by Teradata. Karthik is the author of several publications, patents, and a popular book called Network Routing, Algorithms, Protocols, and Architectures. And it is with great pleasure to be able to have Karthik Ramasamy, part of DataCon LA 2020. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it along to Karthik.
Thanks, Jeanne, for the intro. Let me start sharing my slides, if that's okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Karthik.
Okay. So the title of my, thanks for the nice introduction, Jermaine. So the title of my talk will be Adopting Apache Pulsar at Splunk. So it's almost a year since we got acquired by Splunk, and we made a huge impact in terms of getting Pulsar productionized across a different part of the Splunk. So essentially, this talk will be a journey about what are the things that we did before we chose Apache Pulsar at Splunk on a wider enterprise-wide scale. So this is me. I think Jermaine had a great introduction about me. If you had any questions on the talk or about our engineering products and other things that Splunk provides, happy to answer them later in the talk. So these are some of the forward legal looking statements. So just to be on the safer side. So the title of my, so the agenda for the talk will be, I give a brief introduction to Splunk, and then what are the various streaming requirements that we evaluated the Pulsar against, and how Pulsar satisfies those requirements, and what we do with Pulsar at Splunk, and I will be able to take questions. So let me give a brief introduction to Splunk. So the data is, we are in a data age. So there are a lot of new technologies that are coming in online that helps in collecting data from various different assets and fueling the digitization of the enterprise. This can range from AR, VR, robotic process automation, IoT, then AI, new data platforms, and mobility. There's a bunch of vectors and axes that are collecting data and ingesting them at a high velocity. So data is transforming everything, like the way we work, the way we live, and the way we play. So everything is being governed by data at this point in time. So Splunk essentially provides a data to everything platform that Splunk collects the data and analyzes the data and gives the insights into different parts of the enterprises, ranging from IT, security, DevOps, business process, so that you can either save cost or be compliant and guard your security, and also increase your sales based on monitoring your business continuously. So there are core set of new emerging use cases that we have identified. So some of the core use cases include real-time monitoring and notifications. So for which we bought a company called SignalFX last year. Then we announced our Observability Suite a couple of weeks ago. So last week, actually, at the Splunk Premier Conference .conf 2020. So then there are interactive applications, then log processing and analytics, which Splunk is traditionally leader in it, and IoT analytics, ranging capturing data at the where the sensors interface with the environment and collecting those data and sending that to the cloud for processing or locally processing at the edge itself. And of course, in addition to that, we have the notion of real-time analytics, event-driven workflows, data distribution, and streaming data transformations. So in order to evaluate a streaming system, all these emerging use cases require a streaming system of some form, that is essentially messaging/streaming system. So in order to evaluate a good streaming system, we evaluated on multiple different dimensions. So first is the scalability aspect of it. The second one is durability, then fault tolerance, followed by high availability, followed by sharing and isolation. And what are the client languages that you can interact with the system? Then what are the different type of messaging models that you can support within a system? Then what type of persistence that system provides, whether it provides high durability versus transient persistence, and provide type safety to the application. Now easy to deploy in Kubernetes, with Kubernetes being popular orchestration methods. So in addition to that, there are additional requirements in terms of operability, disaster recovery, how you can do your applications type of disaster recovery, and what is the total ownership of total cost of ownership, and how to monitor the system from an observability standpoint. And since we are heavily into consuming open source, how the ecosystem of open source is evolving, and what kind of adoption is there, and what kind of community is there, what type of licensing the open source software provides. These are the several dimensions that we evaluated the software under. So I won't have time to evaluate all, go through each one of them, but I will pick up some of the highlights of the evaluations. So now scalability. Traffic, why we require scalability. Traffic can widely vary while the system is in production, and system need to scale up with no effect to publish and consume and throughput and latency. And we need to linearly able to increase the decrease publish and consume throughput as the new nodes or clusters are expanded, and automatically spread out the load as new nodes are added. And the scalability could be both on the serving side of the system or a storage side of the system. And how does Pulsar provides it? Because Pulsar provides a multi-layer architecture that allows you, the top level function processing is called the workers, which provides a scalable compute layer. Then the messaging layer, which is essentially serves as a serving layer, is consists of brokers. That is also a separate layer. And the bookies, which forms the event storage or the storage layer. Each of these layers can be independently scaled. So if you wanted to increase the serving storage, just increase the workers. If you wanted to do more compute, increase the workers pods. So that way it's have a seamless scalability across the board. It essentially independent layers for processing, serving, and storage helps a lot. And the messaging and processing are built around Apache Pulsar, and the storage is built on top of a book, open source called Bookkeeper. But when you download the Pulsar and work with it, it has embedded bookkeeper already inside. So the second one is durability. So Splunk applications have different type of durability. One is persistent durability, so which means no data loss in the presence of node failures or entire cluster failure, and it's essential for security and compliance related applications. And replicated durability, no data loss in the presence of limited node failures. Like, some of the application that can take exploit of this is machine log. The third one is transient durability, data loss in the presence of failures. But for example, if there is a metrics data and other things which where you are looking for a trend in an application, might not need the strong durability. Transient durability is fine with it. So how do Pulsar achieves durability? So we have the producer in turn produces data, which is publishes to the broker, and the broker in turn sends replicates the data across multiple storage bookies, and the bookies in turn do the what do you call flush it into a journal, right? Like write ahead logs, and once you write into write ahead logs, it's guaranteed to be on the disk. So even if a bookies die, cluster dies, you can recover it from the journal itself to replay the data back. So that way, like it provides strong durability. And because of the replication, it provides replicated durability. Even if some nodes are down, with the replica context of 2 nodes down means you have the availability of data. And the brokers also support transient durability, where it caches the data and serves it out of it, rather than going to all the bookies. So when the broker goes down, data might be lost, but that is for what we call as a transient topic. If it's a non-persistent topic, then the data goes all the way to the bookies and stored. Even if a broker dies and comes back, automatically the data will be replayed back to you without any loss. So next is requirement is fault tolerance, the ability of the system to function under component failures, and ideally without any manual intervention up to a certain degree. I mean, we cannot avoid complete manual intervention, but it's desirable to have fault tolerance that are more or less automatic. So because of the fact that it's a two-layered architecture and the brokers are essentially serverless, stateless, so when a broker fails, the topic is reassigned to a available broker based on load, and it can construct the state consistently from the bookkeeper. Bookkeeper, the storage layer, is the one which keeps the state, and there's no need for copying of the data. On the other hand, when a bookie fails, the writing of the data switches to the healthy bookies, and then the background process copies the data so that we can bring the replica factor when it's not available on when the replica factor goes down because of the fact that node went down. But the key thing is the writes is not targeted to certain nodes only. So writes can keep on going on any set of nodes as long as any 3 nodes are available because of the replica factor of 3. So now requirement 6, client languages. So Pulsar supports a bunch of languages in which you can write client applications for. That includes C++, Java, Python, Go, C. We recently added the Node.js, and then these are all officially supported by the project. In addition to that, there is a Rust client and a Scala client, native Scala client, which you can write, which is maintained by the community themselves. So requirement 7. So there are different type of messaging models, in the sense like Splunk applications require different consuming model. One is collect once and deliver once capability. That is like some examples of that is process an S3 file and ingest into the Splunk index. Then receive data once and deliver it many times, like multiple pipelines sharing the same data for different type of processing. So those are the 2 different type of consuming models. Now, and we wanted to avoid 2 systems, one for different models, and because it's expensive from costly and operations perspective. And we wanted to, even if we have to emulate one system on top of the other, we requires a high level infra level code. So we wanted to avoid that kind of extra infra level code that we wanted to add and to bring the deficiency of one system to retrofit into the messaging models that we want. So Pulsar has the inbuilt messaging models themselves. One is called messaging, other one is queuing. So by virtue of the nature of the subscription that provides messaging, there is a exclusive subscription and failover subscription. This allows exactly once delivery of the messages to the consumers, whereas queuing uses shared subscription and key shared subscription, and those subscription allow the data to be round robin across multiple consumers. And if you go a little bit deeper into the tech, so the messaging requires acknowledgement, what we call as a cumulative acknowledgement, whereas the queuing requires what we call a selective acknowledgement to keep track of which message has been consumed, which message has not been consumed. So because of the fact Pulsar provides native supports, it avoids two systems. If you have to do this today, you might have to have without Pulsar, you might have to have a Kafka cluster and as a RabbitMQ cluster, whereas in Pulsar case, you can collapse all of them into one single cluster, and it provides both the semantics of Kafka-like messaging as well as RabbitMQ style queuing. And so no infrastructure code is involved that requires maintenance. So the requirement 12, disaster recovery. So critical enterprise data flows through Splunk products, and customers expect continuous availability both in cloud and on-premise. And we need to gracefully handle data center failures. How does Pulsar provides the disaster recovery? Because Pulsar provides asynchronous replication across data centers running multiple different Pulsar clusters, or synchronous replication depending upon the application semantics. Just to give a flavor of the async replication, you have data center A, you have data center B. So then the active primary cluster is publishing data. The producers are producing data, consumers are consuming data. Then you can have a standby that the primary is continuously geo-replicating the data. And the moment the data center failure occurs, it can, the producers and consumers on the standby cluster can be started, and they can resume where they left off. So they, in the async replication case, they can consumers can kind of what do you call, resume very close to where they left off, because of the, we have the notion of markers and other implementation that allows it called replicated subscription. So in addition to that, the synchronous replication also is possible, but in the interest of time, I have not captured that. So now the requirement 13, performance and TCO. Splunk application requirements are very varied. Some of them is very close to real time. Some of them are near real time. And we need a high throughput ability to handle multi-petabytes a day on a single cluster. We conducted a detailed performance study with Kafka under ideal settings, and we did a detailed performance analysis. Those detailed performance analysis will be published as a blog when we get some time. So on the evaluation that we found out, it also provides consistently 5x to 50x lower in latency, and it uses consistently lesser amount of brokers and bookie as compared to brokers in Kafka, because it exploits the available disk bandwidth quite large. And Pulsar uses 50 to 60% less CPU cores with complete control over memory. In Kafka and all, you have to grab as much memory as possible from the page cache. Whereas Pulsar just you configure how much memory you need to use, it will use only that memory. And the Pulsar single partition throughput is 5x higher and 5x to 50x lower in latency. In addition, like to summarize it, Pulsar is 1.5 to 2x lower in capex cost, with 5 to 50x improvement in latency, and 2 to 3x lower in opex due to layered architecture and the capabilities it provides. So the requirement 15, ecosystem. I mean, there is a lot of connectors that have gone in, and more connectors are popping up every day. So the ecosystem is a healthy ecosystem, and it's growing. And from an adoption perspective, the lot of companies that you know have adopted Pulsar. I mean, so far we are counting around 700 plus companies that have adopted Pulsar, and it's and it has been growing at a healthy pace. So the community-wise, when I prepared the slides, it was 280, which was probably a couple of months ago. Now the number of contributors have gone past 320, and the number of committers is increasing. We have, as I said, like we have 600 plus 700 companies using it. Now the GitHub stars are 5.7K. Now it has reached 6.7K. So it's at a very faster pace of growth. And the licensing is a friendly Apache license. And it's affiliated with the vendor neutral institutions. So you can do anything with it. So there's no vendor control components, which means you can safely adopt. And there's no risk of vendors would change the license later if it's a vendor control open source. So from that perspective, it's easy to adopt and easy to contribute back into the open source. So how we use Pulsar. Pulsar has been running as a service in production, processing several billions of messages per day at Splunk. And Pulsar is integrated as a message bus in the Splunk DSP 1.0 onwards, which is the core streaming product offered by Splunk. And the new version of Splunk 1.2.0 has been announced last week. And Pulsar is being introduced in other initiatives as well in the core of the different components. So I'll give you some perspective about Splunk DSP. What does it mean? It's a real-time stream processing engine that collects and delivers data to Splunk and other destinations in milliseconds. You can have a lot of different myriad of data sources that can be ingested into Splunk data stream processor. And Splunk data stream processor can do a lot of processing in terms of filtering data, enhancing data, or normalizing data, transforming data, and enriching it. Then aggregate data if you want doing some kind of data in motion analytics, and reformat data like doing line breaking and event formatting. Then if you have very sensitive data, then you can mask those sensitive data, and you can detect patterns and anomalies, and based on adaptive thresholding conditions. So all those various different aspects are provided by allowing you to author your own pipelines and passing the data through these pipelines in order to do a real-time processing and send it to Splunk indexes or a data warehouse or public cloud or even other message buses and S3 storage like S3. So DSP solves a lot of challenges. It provides control in terms of massive amounts of data that are hard to collect and protect and deliver the right data to the right users and systems. And we can make data decisions with the multiple instances and subsidiaries both on cloud and on-prem. And you can generate critical insights pretty much at the speed of data in motion. So if you look at the DSP architecture, we have the notion of multiple ways by which you can ingest data. One is the Splunk proprietary HTTP event collector, and the next one is Splunk to Splunk protocol, which are the Splunk proprietary protocol. And then we have the notion of batch sources, which allows you to periodically run those batch sources, collecting data from files like coming from FTP, S3, where the data is collected on a periodic fashion. It can be converted into a batch to a real time or a streaming fashion. And we are in the process of exposing the Pulsar port also. So if you have a Pulsar client or a Pulsar clients like FluentD or FluentBit that you can ingest the data on, you can get it into Pulsar right away. So Pulsar is a core messaging bus in the DSP product, and that in turn takes into the stream processing engine for pipeline definition. Then pipelines process the data and send to the Splunk indexer on the external systems. So Splunk is very committed to advancing Pulsar as it is used by core products, and some of the current work involved is we have constantly improving the Go client and adding more and more batch connectors. We have written a Pulsar Kubernetes operator that is going to be open source, and we have tested so heavily on Pulsar. We are in the process of committing some of the bug fixes that we found into the open source, so that the open source can benefit out of whatever the testing that we have done, as we benefit from the open source testing that we get the code from. And feature work, some of the feature work involve auto partitioning, pluggable metadata store, and state store, which allows you to store the state and retrieve the state needed for function processing or the compute side of the things. So that is currently in the works. So there's a few additional interesting projects that we might pick it up as the business demands. But overall, Splunk is very committed to advancing Pulsar. So that's all I had. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Perfect. If there are any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop it into the chat. There's also the session Q&A, and Karthik would be happy to answer that. And also just wanted to call out, Splunk does have an exhibitor booth that is available, so you can learn more about Splunk, and the link is dropped in the chat as well. I'll give it a few minutes to see if there are any questions there for Karthik. Karthik, so I do see one question, and this question is from Anand Ranganathan. Apologies if I'm butchering your last name there, but is Splunk DSP implemented as a Apache Pulsar worker?
So Splunk DSP not only consists Pulsar, it has a lot of other things in terms of the user experience, the UI, and protocol, the ability to ingest into DSP, and also the ability to pass the data to different destinations in terms of connectors and other aspects. It's a complete product from end to end, and internally it takes advantage of Pulsar heavily. On the surface of the areas of Pulsar is including Pulsar not only providing the messaging system capability, it also going to provide all the connector framework on the connectors and everything that Pulsar, DSP runs on, relies on, right? So that way the Splunk DSP is not only pure Pulsar, it has much more enterprise-wide features that we have added on top of to deliver DSP.
Great. Thank you so much for your question, Anand. And then we also have one more from John Liu. And the question is, comparing with Kafka per DevOps or from a maintenance perspective, is Pulsar easy to manage or not? And are there any GUI consoles for it to monitor the data messaging stream from end to end?
Yes, so there are a complete set of dashboards that are available that you can monitor through Grafana, and that includes general metrics, broker metrics, bookie metrics, then the worker metrics, JVM metrics, network metrics, host metrics, then how much data you're publishing, how much data is being geo-replicated. You have all kind of observability metrics that you can provide it. And in addition to the metrics, because of the Pulsar architecture, even if one of the brokers go down, it doesn't matter. It can come back on its own. As long as there is enough capacity is there, the brokers, automatically it will shift into the topics that are served by the broker failed. The broker will automatically shift to other brokers and continue to serve. Similarly, on the bookie side, that data will continue to keep writing and reading from it as long as if the replica factor is set to 3, and if the failure is just only 2 nodes, the system can continue to operate on without any manual intervention at any given point in time. So that way, like the system, and you can bring up more brokers, bring up more bookies, or decrease brokers and bookies. In fact, like the next stop that we are going to implement is auto scaling aspects of these elements, so that you don't have to even worry about it. It just start the system and kind of forget the system, so that the system automatically adjusts itself in the cloud-like environment. So, but today, like we have to do the manual increase and decrease in terms of brokers only when the traffic increases or decreases. But even then, that is one simple command in Kubernetes. So you can even automate that if you want, but we are in the process of automating those aspects. So which means Pulsar is completely designed for less operationally intensive like Kafka is. Kafka means if one node goes down, you have to make sure that data is copied to other node, which means that there's a lot of rebalancing and other things that you have to take care of it. So there's a lot of, I don't want to go into details of it, but Kafka is operationally very intensive.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karthik. And hopefully that answered your question, John. If you'd like to dive a little bit deeper with Splunk, feel free to visit their exhibitor booth, and I'm sure Karthik will be able to provide more insight for you there. And I believe that concludes all of the questions for today, but do want to thank you so much for your time on joining us on this Saturday morning, Karthik, and it's a pleasure to have you, along with Splunk, part of DataCon LA 2020 again.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Karthik. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's keynote sessions. And I know we have a jam-packed schedule ahead, and we hope you really do take full advantage of all these different amazing sessions and tracks. And we encourage you to continue to share your experience across social media and tag DataCon LA, as well as using the hashtag DCLA2020. And as a reminder, we will be reuniting at 5 p.m. for our networking session later today. And should you have any technical difficulties throughout DataCon, please feel free to contact helpdesk@dataconla.com. That's helpdesk, one word, @dataconla.com, and we'll promptly assist you. But aside from that, hope everyone enjoys day 2 of DataCon LA and look forward to seeing you all at the networking session this evening.